The morning sun cast long shadows across Lincoln Heights Middle School as students poured through the front doors, their voices echoing through the hallways like a symphony of youth and energy. Among them walked Maya Robinson, a 14-year-old eighth grader with bright eyes and a backpack covered in buttons featuring quotes from her favorite books. She moved with quiet confidence, her natural hair pulled back in a neat puff, her school uniform pressed and pristine. Maya had always loved school, not just for the academics, where she consistently ranked among the top students, but for the sense of possibility that filled these halls. She dreamed of becoming a civil rights attorney someday, inspired by her father's work and the stories he told her around the dinner table about fighting for justice. "Hey Maya, wait up!" The voice belonged to her best friend, Jasmine Chen, who rushed to catch up, nearly dropping her violin case in the process. "Girl, you walk too fast," Jasmine panted, falling into step beside her. "Did you finish the history essay?" Maya smiled. "Finished it Sunday night, you?" "Just barely. My mum had me practicing violin for 3 hours yesterday. My fingers are still sore." Jasmine flexed her hands dramatically. They rounded the corner toward their lockers, passing by the main office where Principal Henderson stood, greeting students with his characteristic warm smile. The morning announcements crackled over the intercom, reminding everyone about the upcoming spring festival and the basketball team's championship game on Friday. Everything felt normal, routine, safe. Maya had no way of knowing that in less than an hour, her entire world would be turned upside down. The incident happened between second and third period, in the crowded hallway outside the science wing. Maya was walking toward her advanced biology class, her mind occupied with thoughts about the lab they would be conducting that day. She had her notebook open, reviewing her hypothesis one last time, when someone bumped into her from behind, sending her papers scattering across the floor. "Sorry," a boy called out, already disappearing into the crowd without stopping to help. Maya sighed and knelt down to gather her notes. As she reached for the last paper, which had slid near the wall, a shadow fell over her. "What do you think you're doing blocking the hallway?" She looked up to find Mr. Gerald Thornton looming over her, his arms crossed and his face twisted into an expression of barely concealed contempt. Mr. Thornton was the school's 8th grade history teacher, a man in his mid-50s with graying hair and perpetually pursed lips. He'd been teaching at Lincoln Heights for over 2 decades, and among certain students there were whispered stories about his favoritism, his harsh grading, his tendency to single out specific kids for criticism. Maya had never had him as a teacher, but she had heard the rumors. "I'm sorry, sir," she said politely, quickly gathering her remaining papers and standing up. "Someone bumped into me and my notes fell. I was just picking them up." "Excuses," Mr. Thornton snapped. "You people are always full of excuses." Maya felt her stomach clench. "You people." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. She wanted to believe she had misheard, wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt, but the way he was looking at her, with that particular brand of disdain she had encountered before in her young life, told her everything she needed to know. "I said I was sorry," Maya repeated, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I'm heading to class now." She tried to step around him, but Mr. Thornton moved to block her path. "Don't you walk away from me when I'm talking to you," he said, his voice rising. Other students in the hallway were beginning to notice, their conversations dying down as they sensed the tension building. "Sir, I need to get to class," Maya said, trying to remain calm. "I don't want to be late." "Late? You should have thought about that before you decided to make a spectacle of yourself in the middle of the hallway." "I wasn't making a spectacle, I was picking up my papers." Something in Mr. Thornton's eyes shifted. Maybe it was Maya's refusal to cower, her insistence on stating the simple truth. Whatever it was, it seemed to enrage him. "You've got quite the attitude problem," he said, stepping closer. "I see kids like you come through here all the time, think you're entitled to everything, think the rules don't apply to you." Maya's jaw tightened. "I don't know what you mean by kids like me, sir, but I haven't broken any rules. I was simply picking up my belongings." The hallway had gone completely silent now. A crowd of students had gathered, watching the confrontation unfold with wide eyes and held breath. Someone had already pulled out their phone and was recording, though Maya didn't notice. "Now you're talking back to me?" Mr. Thornton's face had turned an alarming shade of red. "You need to learn some respect." "I am being respectful," Maya said, her voice cracking slightly despite her best efforts to remain composed. "I've apologized multiple times. I just want to go to class." What happened next would be replayed thousands of times in the days to come, analyzed from every angle, debated on social media and in faculty meetings and eventually in a courtroom. Mr. Gerald Thornton, a 23-year veteran of the Lincoln Heights School District, reached out and shoved Maya Robinson hard in the shoulder, sending her stumbling backward into a row of lockers. Her head connected with the metal with a sickening thud, and she slid down to the floor, dazed and disoriented. For a moment the world seemed to freeze. Then chaos erupted. "Oh my God!" someone screamed. "Did you see that? He pushed her!" "Someone get help!" Students scattered in all directions. Mr. Thornton stood frozen, staring down at Maya as if he couldn't quite believe what he had just done. The color drained from his face as the reality of the situation began to sink in. Maya pressed her hand to the back of her head, feeling a growing bump where it had struck the locker. Tears streamed down her face, but they were tears of shock more than pain. She had never been struck by an adult before, had never had anyone put their hands on her in anger. Jasmine appeared out of nowhere, kneeling beside her friend. Maya, are you okay? Can you hear me?" I'm okay," Maya managed, though her voice sounded distant to her own ears. Mrs. Patterson, the school nurse, pushed through the gathering crowd, followed closely by Principal Henderson. The principal's usually friendly face was ashen as he took in the scene before him. "Everyone back to class," Principal Henderson ordered, his voice tight with barely controlled emotion. "Now." "Gerald," he said, turning to Mr. Thornton, "my office, immediately." Mr. Thornton opened his mouth as if to speak, then closed it again. Without a word, he turned and walked toward the main office, his footsteps echoing in the emptying hallway. Mrs. Patterson helped Maya to her feet. "Can you walk, sweetie? We need to get you to the nurse's office, check you for a concussion." Maya nodded weakly, leaning on Jasmine for support. As they made their way down the hall, she could feel the eyes of the few remaining students following her, could hear the whispered conversations beginning. She didn't know it yet, but one of those students had captured the entire incident on video, and that video was about to change everything. Across town, in a corner office on the 5th floor of the county courthouse, District Attorney Marcus Robinson was reviewing case files when his phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Lincoln Heights Middle School. Marcus Robinson was a distinguished man in his mid-40s, with close-cropped hair graying at the temples and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an air of scholarly authority. He had been the county's first black district attorney, elected 3 years ago on a platform of criminal justice reform and equal treatment under the law. It was a position he took seriously, knowing that every decision he made was scrutinized more closely because of who he was and what he represented. He answered on the second ring. "This is Marcus Robinson." "Mr. Robinson, this is Principal Daniel Henderson from Lincoln Heights Middle School. I'm calling about your daughter, Maya." Marcus felt his heart skip a beat. In his line of work, he had delivered countless pieces of bad news to other parents. The weight of those conversations had taught him to fear phone calls like this. "What happened? Is she okay?" "She's in the nurse's office right now, being checked for a possible concussion. Mr. Robinson, there was an incident in the hallway involving one of our teachers." "An incident? What kind of incident?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Principal Henderson spoke again, his voice was heavy with something Marcus recognized as shame. "Mr. Robinson, one of our teachers physically pushed Maya in the hallway. She struck her head against a locker. I want to assure you that we are taking this extremely seriously, and the teacher in question has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation." Marcus felt the room tilt. For a moment he couldn't breathe. His Maya, his brilliant, kind-hearted, straight-A student daughter, someone had put their hands on her. "I'm on my way," he said, already reaching for his jacket. "Do not let that teacher leave the premises. Do you understand me?" "Mr. Robinson, I assure you—" "I'll be there in 15 minutes." He hung up and strode out of his office, passing his assistant without a word. She called after him, asking about his afternoon meetings, but he was already at the elevator, jamming the button repeatedly. In the car, Marcus called his wife, Denise. She was a pediatrician at the county hospital, and she answered with her professional voice before hearing the tension in his words. "Marcus, what's wrong?" "It's Maya. Something happened at school. A teacher pushed her." What do you mean pushed her?" "I don't have all the details yet. She hit her head. They're checking for a concussion." "I'm leaving now," Denise said, and he could hear her already moving, grabbing her things. "Meet you there." Marcus arrived at the school in 12 minutes, a personal record that involved several traffic violations he chose not to think about. He pulled into the parking lot to find news vans already setting up on the street outside. Word had spread fast. He walked through the front doors with purpose, his prosecutor's instincts kicking in, even as his heart ached with fatherly concern. The receptionist recognized him and immediately buzzed him through to the main office. Principal Henderson was waiting for him, wringing his hands nervously. "Mr. Robinson, thank you for coming so quickly. Maya is in the nurse's office. She's doing much better." "Take me to my daughter," Marcus said. It wasn't a request. The principal led him down the hallway to the nurse's office, where Maya sat on the examination table, an ice pack pressed to the back of her head. Her eyes were red from crying, but she looked up when her father entered and managed a weak smile. "Daddy!" Marcus crossed the room in 3 strides and gathered his daughter in his arms, holding her close. "I'm here, baby girl. I'm here." "I didn't do anything wrong," Maya whispered against his chest. "I was just picking up my papers. I swear, Daddy, I didn't do anything." "I know, sweetheart, I know." Denise arrived moments later, rushing into the nurse's office with the barely controlled panic of a mother who has spent the last 20 minutes imagining worst-case scenarios. She immediately went into doctor mode, checking Maya's pupils, asking about symptoms, examining the bump on her head. "She needs to go to the hospital for a proper examination," Denise said firmly. "I want a CT scan to rule out any serious injury." "Of course," Principal Henderson said quickly. "Whatever you need." Marcus turned to face the principal, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop by several degrees. "I want to see all the evidence. Security footage, witness statements, everything." "Mr. Robinson, I understand you're upset, but perhaps we should wait until—" "Now, Principal Henderson." The principal swallowed hard. "There is one thing you should see. A student recorded the incident on their phone. The video has already been shared quite widely on social media." He pulled out his tablet and, with visible reluctance, queued up the video. Marcus watched in silence as his daughter was berated by a grown man, watched as she tried to defend herself with nothing but words, watched as Mr. Thornton shoved her into the lockers with enough force to send her crashing to the ground. When the video ended, Marcus's hands were shaking, not with fear but with a cold, controlled rage that had served him well in courtrooms across the state. "Where is he?" Marcus asked quietly. "Where is Gerald Thornton right now?" "He's in the conference room with the union representative. We've placed him on administrative leave, pending—" "Administrative leave," Marcus repeated, his voice deceptively calm. "A teacher assaults a student, and your response is administrative leave. Mr. Robinson, there are procedures we have to follow. The union requires—" "Do you know what I see when I watch that video, Principal Henderson?" Marcus stepped closer, his eyes boring into the other man's. "I see assault and battery on a minor. I see what appears to be a racially motivated attack on an unarmed child. I see criminal conduct that would result in immediate arrest if it occurred anywhere else in this county." Principal Henderson's face had gone pale. "Mr. Robinson, surely you can understand that the school needs to conduct its own investigation before—" "I am the district attorney of this county," Marcus said, and for the first time he let the full weight of that title settle into his voice. "And I am telling you right now that if Gerald Thornton walks out of this building without being placed under arrest, I will personally ensure that this school district faces the full consequences of harboring a criminal." The room fell silent. Principal Henderson looked like he might be sick. "I'm calling the police," Marcus continued, pulling out his phone. "Not as the district attorney, but as a father whose child has been attacked. What happens next will be determined by the evidence and the law, as it should be." He dialed the non-emergency line and requested officers be sent to Lincoln Heights Middle School to investigate a report of assault. Then he turned back to his wife and daughter. "Let's get Maya to the hospital," he said, his voice softening. "The police can take our statements there." As they walked out of the nurse's office, Maya tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, is that man going to go to jail?" Marcus looked down at his daughter, at the fear and confusion in her eyes, and felt his heart break all over again. "Baby girl, I can't promise you what will happen, but I can promise you this: what he did was wrong, and there will be consequences. That's what justice means." Maya nodded slowly. "Okay, Daddy, I trust you." Those 3 words hit Marcus harder than anything else that had happened that day. His daughter's trust was sacred, and he would move heaven and earth to prove it was not misplaced. By the time they reached the hospital, the video of Maya's assault had been viewed over 50,000 times. By evening, it would reach 1 million. The story was no longer about one teacher and one student. It had become something much bigger, much more powerful. It had become a reckoning. The news spread through the community like wildfire. By evening, the local news stations had picked up the story, and by the next morning, it had gone national. The video of Mr. Thornton shoving Maya into the lockers played on loop on cable news, social media, and morning talk shows across the country. Headlines screamed from every screen. "Teacher assaults black student in school hallway. District attorney's daughter attacked by teacher. Shocking video shows educator pushing teenage girl." The Robinson family's home was surrounded by news trucks and reporters, forcing them to stay with Denise's sister across town. Maya couldn't go back to school, couldn't even go outside without being photographed and questioned. "I just want things to go back to normal," Maya whispered to her mother as they watched yet another news report about the incident. "I didn't ask for any of this." Denise pulled her daughter close. "I know, baby. None of this is your fault. You did nothing wrong." "Then why does it feel like I'm being punished?" It was a question Denise couldn't answer, because the truth was too painful. In a just world, Maya would have been protected by the very institution that had failed her. In a just world, she would be in class right now, learning and laughing with her friends, instead of hiding from cameras and fielding calls from lawyers and victims' advocates. But the world was not always just. That was why people like Marcus fought so hard to make it better. Gerald Thornton was arrested the day after the incident, charged with simple assault and child abuse. He was released on bail within hours, but the damage to his reputation was already done. The teachers' union initially pledged to support him, but as more details emerged about his history of disciplinary issues and complaints from students and parents, that support began to waver. Former students came forward with their own stories. A black boy who'd been called lazy and unmotivated despite being an honor student. A Hispanic girl who had been told she would never amount to anything after struggling with a single assignment. A pattern of behavior that stretched back years, dismissed or ignored by administrators who found it easier to look the other way. 3 days after Maya's assault, a community meeting was held at the local recreation center. The room was packed with parents, students, teachers, and concerned citizens who had watched the viral video and wanted answers. Principal Henderson stood at the front of the room, flanked by members of the school board, looking like a man facing a firing squad. Superintendent Patricia Graves, a stern woman in her 60s, attempted to maintain order as the crowd grew restless. "We understand that emotions are running high," Dr. Graves began, "and we want to assure you that the district is taking this matter very seriously. Mr. Thornton has been placed on unpaid leave pending the outcome of the criminal proceedings, and we are conducting a thorough review of our policies regarding student safety." "That's not good enough," a woman in the front row shouted. "My son had Thornton 2 years ago and came home crying almost every day. I filed 3 complaints and nothing was done." "How many kids have to get hurt before you actually do something?" another parent demanded. The room erupted in angry voices. Principal Henderson tried to respond, but his words were drowned out by the crowd. In the back of the room, Marcus stood with his arm around Maya, who had insisted on attending despite her parents' reservations. "She needed to see this," she said. "She needed to know that people cared." And they did care. Watching the outpouring of support from complete strangers, Maya felt something shift inside her. The fear and shame that had been weighing her down began to lift, replaced by something else, something that felt like strength. When there was a brief lull in the shouting, Maya tugged on her father's sleeve. "Daddy, I want to say something." Marcus looked down at her with concern. "Are you sure, baby? You don't have to." "I know, but I want to." He nodded slowly and raised his hand. "Excuse me, my daughter would like to speak." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Maya as she made her way to the front, her heart pounding but her steps steady. She had given presentations in class before, had won debate competitions and spelling bees, but nothing had prepared her for this moment. She reached the microphone and had to adjust it down to her height. The simple action seemed to remind everyone in the room just how young she was, and a collective murmur of sympathy rippled through the crowd. "My name is Maya Robinson," she began, her voice small but clear. "I'm the student in the video." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "I've been trying to figure out what to say. Part of me just wants to forget this ever happened and go back to my regular life. But I can't do that, because what happened to me wasn't just about me." Maya looked out at the crowd, at the faces of parents and students and teachers who had come to stand with her. "I've heard so many stories over the past few days, stories from kids who were treated badly by teachers or coaches or other adults at school. Kids who didn't have anyone to stand up for them, kids who were told they were the problem when they tried to speak up." Her voice grew stronger. "I'm lucky. I have parents who believe me and support me. I have friends who stood by me, but not everyone is that lucky, and that's not okay." She turned to face the school board members, who shifted uncomfortably in their seats. "You're supposed to protect us, all of us, not just the kids whose parents are lawyers or doctors or district attorneys. Every kid deserves to feel safe at school. Every kid deserves to be treated with respect." Tears were streaming down her face now, but she didn't wipe them away. "I don't know what's going to happen with Mr. Thornton. That's for the courts to decide. But I do know that this has to mean something. It can't just be about one teacher and one student. It has to be about changing the system that let this happen in the first place." She looked back at her parents, drawing strength from their presence. "My dad always tells me that justice isn't something that just happens. It's something you have to fight for, every single day. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to fight for justice, not just for me, but for every kid who's ever been hurt by someone who was supposed to protect them." The room erupted in applause. People rose to their feet, clapping and cheering for this brave young girl who had turned her trauma into a call for change. Maya stood at the microphone, overwhelmed by the response, until her father came forward and wrapped her in a tight embrace. "I'm so proud of you," Marcus whispered in her ear, "so incredibly proud." That night, Maya's speech was broadcast on every major news network. The hashtag Justice for Maya trended worldwide. Donations poured in to support educational reform initiatives. Politicians weighed in, promising to address the systemic issues that had allowed such abuse to persist. But for Maya, the most important moment came later, when she was back at her aunt's house, surrounded by her family. "You were amazing today," Jasmine said over FaceTime, her eyes still red from crying. "Like seriously amazing." Maya smiled tiredly. "I was terrified. That's what made it so brave, being scared and doing it anyway." Later, as she lay in bed trying to sleep, Maya thought about what Jasmine had said. Being scared and doing it anyway. That was what courage meant, wasn't it? Not the absence of fear, but the determination to keep going despite it. She still had nightmares about that moment in the hallway, still flinched when someone moved too quickly near her. The trauma wouldn't disappear overnight, but for the first time since the incident, she felt like she had some control over her own story. And that was worth fighting for. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media appearances, and difficult conversations. Marcus made the decision to recuse himself from any involvement in the criminal case against Gerald Thornton, knowing that his role as Maya's father made it impossible for him to be objective. Instead, the case was assigned to Assistant District Attorney Jennifer Walsh, a seasoned prosecutor known for her meticulous preparation and unwavering commitment to justice. Marcus trusted her completely, which was the only reason he was able to step back. "This is one of the most clear-cut cases of assault I've ever seen," Jennifer told Marcus during their one official conversation about the matter. "The video evidence is damning, and we have multiple witnesses. The only question is what charges we can get to stick." "I want him held accountable," Marcus said. "But more than that, I want this to set a precedent. Teachers who abuse their power need to know there will be consequences." Jennifer nodded. "I understand, and I promise you, I'll do everything in my power to make sure justice is served." Meanwhile, the school board faced mounting pressure to take action beyond simply firing Gerald Thornton. A coalition of parents and community members, galvanized by Maya's speech, demanded comprehensive reforms, including mandatory anti-bias training for all staff, clearer reporting procedures for student complaints, and the establishment of an independent oversight committee. Leading this coalition was an unexpected figure, Mrs. Rebecca Thornton, Gerald Thornton's ex-wife. Rebecca had divorced Gerald 5 years earlier, citing emotional abuse and what she called his explosive temper. She had watched the video of her ex-husband attacking Maya with a mixture of horror and grim recognition. "I knew this would happen eventually," Rebecca told reporters outside the courthouse where Gerald's preliminary hearing was being held. "I tried to warn people. I filed complaints with the school district during our marriage after I saw how he treated students during parent-teacher conferences. But nobody wanted to listen." Her testimony would prove crucial in establishing Gerald's pattern of behavior, painting a picture of a man whose prejudices and anger had been allowed to fester unchecked for years. Maya returned to school 2 weeks after the incident, accompanied by her mother on the first day. She had expected hostility, expected to be treated differently by students and teachers alike. What she found instead surprised her. As she walked through the front doors, students she barely knew approached her with words of support. "We saw your speech. You're so brave." "My little brother was scared of Mr. Thornton. Thank you for standing up. If anyone gives you trouble, let me know. I've got your back." Teachers made a point of checking in on her, asking how she was doing, ensuring she felt safe in their classrooms. Principal Henderson, humbled by the community's response, personally apologized to Maya and her family for failing to protect her. "I should have known," he said, his voice thick with regret. "I should have done more to monitor Mr. Thornton's behavior. I let you down, and I let down every student he mistreated over the years." Maya accepted his apology with grace that belied her 14 years. "Thank you for saying that, but I don't need apologies as much as I need change. Can you promise me that things will be different from now on?" Principal Henderson met her eyes. "I give you my word." Not everyone was supportive, of course. There were whispered comments in the hallways, anonymous notes left in her locker accusing her of ruining a good teacher's life. One particularly cruel message suggested she had deserved what happened to her. Maya found that note during lunch period and felt all the progress she had made crumble in an instant. She fled to the bathroom, locked herself in a stall, and sobbed until she couldn't breathe. That was where Jasmine found her 15 minutes later. Maya, open the door! Go away, Maya choked out. I'm fine. You're clearly not fine. Please let me in. After a long moment, Maya unlocked the door. Jasmine slipped inside, crowding into the small space, and wrapped her arms around her best friend. I found the note, Jasmine said quietly. Marcus, who's in my Spanish class, saw who put it in your locker. We reported it to the office. It doesn't matter, Maya said bitterly. There will always be people who think I'm the problem. Those people are wrong, and they're cowards who can't even say their garbage opinions to your face. Jasmine pulled back and looked Maya in the eye. You are the bravest person I know. You stood up in front of the whole community and told the truth. That takes more courage than hiding behind anonymous notes ever will. Maya wiped her eyes. What if I'm not as brave as everyone thinks? What if I'm just pretending? Then you're really good at pretending, Jasmine said with a small smile. But I don't think that's true. I think you're brave and scared at the same time, and that's okay. That's what being human is. They sat together in the bathroom stall until the bell rang, not saying much, just being present with each other. And when they finally emerged, Maya felt a little bit stronger than before. The student who left the note was identified and suspended for harassment. It was a small victory, but it mattered. Gerald Thornton's trial began 6 months after the incident, on a bright October morning that felt incongruously cheerful given the gravity of the proceedings. The courtroom was packed with reporters, community members, and educators from across the state, who had come to witness what many were calling a landmark case. Maya sat in the front row with her parents, wearing a simple blue dress that her mother had helped her pick out. She had been told she might be called to testify, and the prospect filled her with dread. But she was determined to face Gerald Thornton in court, to look him in the eye and tell him what he had done to her. The prosecution's case was methodical and devastating. Jennifer Walsh presented the video evidence, which had been enhanced and analyzed by experts to show the force of Thornton's shove. She called witnesses who had been in the hallway that day, students who described Maya's calm demeanor and Thornton's escalating aggression. She presented testimony from former students who had experienced Thornton's bullying and intimidation over the years, painting a picture of a man who had weaponized his authority against the most vulnerable. And she called Rebecca Thornton, whose testimony about her ex-husband's behavior at home drew audible gasps from the gallery. He would come home from work furious, Rebecca said, her voice steady despite the difficulty of her words. He would rant about students he thought were disrespectful, students who didn't know their place. He used language I won't repeat in this courtroom. I knew eventually that anger would boil over. The defense attorney, a well-dressed man named Thomas Hartley, tried his best to undermine the prosecution's case. He argued that Thornton had simply been trying to maintain order in a chaotic hallway, that his actions were a momentary lapse in judgment rather than a deliberate attack. My client has served this community for over 2 decades, Hartley said in his opening statement. He has dedicated his life to educating young people. Are we really going to destroy that legacy over one isolated incident? But the evidence was overwhelming. The video showed clearly that Maya had posed no threat, that she had been polite and compliant, that Thornton's violence had been entirely unprovoked. When Maya took the stand, the courtroom fell silent. She answered the prosecutor's questions clearly and completely, describing the events of that day with painful precision. She did not embellish or exaggerate. She simply told the truth. "Can you describe how you felt when Mr. Thornton pushed you?" Jennifer asked. Maya was silent for a moment, composing herself. "I felt scared," she said finally, "and confused. I kept thinking this can't be happening. Teachers are supposed to protect students, not hurt them. When I hit the lockers and fell down, I thought maybe I had done something wrong, something to deserve it. It took me a long time to realize that I hadn't done anything, that nothing I could have done would have justified what he did. She looked directly at Gerald Thornton, who sat at the defense table with his head bowed. I was a kid picking up my homework, and you hurt me because of who I am, because of what I look like. That's not discipline, that's not maintaining order, that's just hate. The defense's cross-examination was mercifully brief. Hartley seemed to recognize that attacking Maya on the stand would only further damage his client's case. After 5 days of testimony and 2 days of deliberation, the jury returned its verdict. Guilty of assault and battery on a minor. Guilty of child abuse. The courtroom erupted. Supporters cheered, reporters rushed to file their stories, and Maya collapsed into her father's arms, sobbing with relief. Gerald Thornton sat motionless as the verdict was read, his face a mask of disbelief. When the bailiff approached to take him into custody, he finally spoke. "I didn't mean for this to happen," he said, his voice cracking. "I just lost my temper." It was the closest he would ever come to an apology. Sentencing came 3 weeks later. The judge, a stern woman named Patricia Morrison, who had spent 20 years on the bench, had clearly been moved by the testimony she had heard. "Mr. Thornton," she said, looking down at the defendant from her elevated position, "you were entrusted with the care and education of children. Instead of honoring that sacred trust, you allowed your prejudices and your anger to harm a young person who had done nothing wrong." She paused, allowing her words to settle over the courtroom. "The evidence presented in this trial makes clear that Maya Robinson was not your first victim, merely the first one to be recorded. For years, you used your position of authority to intimidate and belittle students, particularly students of color, and the system that should have stopped you failed to do so." She turned to address the packed courtroom. "This case has exposed serious failures in our educational system. Failures that extend far beyond one man's actions. I hope that the attention this trial has received will lead to meaningful reform, so that no child ever has to experience what Maya Robinson experienced." Returning her attention to Thornton, Judge Morrison delivered her sentence. "Gerald Thornton, I sentence you to 3 years in state prison, with the possibility of parole after 18 months. Additionally, your teaching license is permanently revoked, and you are prohibited from working with children in any capacity." As Thornton was led away in handcuffs, Maya felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief that it was over, sadness that it had happened at all, and a tentative hope that something good might come from all this pain. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed the Robinson family. Marcus held up his hand, requesting a moment to speak. "Today, justice was served," he said, his arm around Maya's shoulders. "But this is not a celebration. This is a reminder of how much work we still have to do. One conviction does not fix a broken system. It is up to all of us, parents and educators and community members, to ensure that every child is safe in our schools." He looked down at Maya with pride. "My daughter showed incredible courage throughout this ordeal. She turned her trauma into advocacy, her pain into purpose. I could not be more proud of the young woman she's becoming." Maya stepped forward to the microphone, her voice clear and strong. "I want to thank everyone who supported me through this. My family, my friends, the community members who stood up and demanded change. This fight isn't over. There are kids in schools all across this country who are being mistreated right now. We have to keep fighting for them." She paused, looking out at the crowd of reporters and supporters. "I used to want to be a civil rights attorney when I grew up. Now I know for sure. I'm going to spend my life fighting for people who don't have anyone to stand up for them. Because everyone deserves justice. Everyone." 1 year later, Maya stood at a podium in the state capitol building, surrounded by legislators, educators, and advocates. She was 15 now. Taller than she had been, more confident in the way she carried herself. The trauma of the incident still lingered. She still had difficult days, but she had learned to channel that pain into action. Governor Elizabeth Chen stood beside her, ready to sign into law the Maya Robinson Student Protection Act, a comprehensive piece of legislation that would mandate anti-bias training for all school employees, establish independent oversight committees for student complaints, and create clear protocols for addressing teacher misconduct. "This law exists because of a young woman who refused to be silenced," Governor Chen said, gesturing to Maya. "When she was knocked down, she got back up and kept fighting. That is the kind of courage we need more of in this world." Maya stepped up to the microphone, her heart full. "A year ago, I was just a kid picking up my homework in a school hallway. I never asked to become an advocate or a symbol, but sometimes life gives you a choice: stay silent or speak up. I chose to speak up, and because of that choice, things are going to change." She looked out at the audience, at her parents beaming with pride, at Jasmine wiping away tears, at the countless supporters who had rallied behind her cause. "This law won't fix everything. There will still be teachers who abuse their power, still be students who fall through the cracks, but it's a start. And every journey toward justice has to start somewhere." She stepped aside as Governor Chen sat down to sign the legislation, cameras flashing and applause filling the ornate chamber. Later, after the ceremony was over and the crowds had dispersed, Maya found a quiet moment with her father on a bench outside the Capitol building. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink. "How do you feel?" Marcus asked. Maya considered the question carefully. "I feel like this is just the beginning," she said. "There's so much more work to do, but for the first time in a long time, I feel like maybe we can actually make things better." Marcus smiled and put his arm around her. "That's exactly the right attitude. Change doesn't happen overnight. It happens through the persistent effort of people who refuse to give up. People like you." "People like us," Maya corrected. "I couldn't have done any of this without you and Mom, without Jasmine and everyone else who supported me." "That's how it works," Marcus said. "Nobody changes the world alone. We do it together, one step at a time." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun sink below the horizon. A year ago, Maya's world had been shattered by an act of senseless violence. But from the wreckage, something beautiful had emerged. A movement, a law, a renewed commitment to protecting the most vulnerable members of society. "Daddy," Maya said finally. "Yes, baby girl? Thank you for believing me, for fighting for me, for teaching me what justice really means." Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes. "Thank you for being brave enough to teach all of us. I learned more from you this past year than you'll ever know." Maya leaned into her father's embrace, feeling safe and loved and hopeful for the future. The road ahead would be long and difficult. There would be setbacks and disappointments, moments when progress seemed impossibly slow. But Maya Robinson had learned something important in the crucible of her experience. She had learned that one voice, raised in truth, could echo across the world. She had learned that justice was not just a destination, but a journey, one that required courage and persistence and an unwavering belief in the possibility of change. And she had learned that even in the darkest moments, there was always light to be found, if you were brave enough to look for it. As the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Maya made a silent promise to herself. She would spend her life honoring the gift she had been given, the chance to turn pain into purpose, trauma into transformation. She would fight for every child who had ever been made to feel small or worthless or afraid. Because that's what justice meant. And Maya Robinson was just getting started. 5 years passed. Maya graduated from high school as valedictorian, her speech touching on themes of resilience, community, and the ongoing fight for educational equity. She was accepted to Columbia University on a full scholarship, where she planned to study political science before attending law school. The night before she left for college, her family gathered for a farewell dinner at their favorite restaurant, the same place they had celebrated every major milestone in Maya's life. Marcus and Denise sat on one side of the table, beaming with pride, while Maya's grandmother, aunts, uncles, and cousins filled in the rest of the seats. "I remember when you were born," Maya's grandmother Esther said, dabbing at her eyes with a napkin. "Your daddy called me and said she's going to change the world someday. And look at you now, he was right." "I didn't change the world, Grandma," Maya said modestly. "I just spoke up when something wrong happened." "That's how the world gets changed," Esther said firmly. "One person speaking up, then another, until you've got a chorus that can't be ignored." Marcus raised his glass. "To Maya, our daughter, our inspiration, our proof that the future is in good hands." "To Maya," everyone echoed, glasses clinking around the table. Later, as Maya was packing the last of her boxes into her father's car, Jasmine arrived with a gift wrapped in sparkly paper. "Open it later," Jasmine said, hugging her tightly, "when you're feeling homesick and need to remember that your best friend loves you and believes in you." Maya clutched the package to her chest. "I'm going to miss you so much. We'll FaceTime every day, and I'm coming to visit during winter break. You can show me around New York." "Deal." They hugged again, reluctant to let go, until Marcus gently reminded Maya that they needed to get to the airport. On the plane, Maya opened Jasmine's gift. It was a scrapbook filled with photos and mementos from their years of friendship. Movie tickets, dried flowers from homecoming corsages, notes passed in class, and dozens of photographs capturing their journey from shy middle schoolers to confident young women. On the last page, Jasmine had written a letter. "Dear Maya, I've been trying to write this letter for weeks, but I keep getting stuck. How do you put into words what someone means to you? 5 years ago, you taught me what courage looks like. Not the absence of fear, but the determination to do what's right even when you're terrified. You showed me that one person can make a difference, that speaking up matters, that justice is worth fighting for. You're going to do amazing things at Columbia and beyond. You're going to change lives and challenge systems and make the world better for everyone. I know this because I've watched you do it already. But no matter how far you go or how much you achieve, remember that you always have a home here. You always have a friend who loves you exactly as you are, and you always have someone cheering for you from the sidelines. Go change the world, Maya Robinson. I'll be right here watching you shine. Love always, Jasmine." Maya closed the scrapbook and wiped the tears from her eyes. She looked out the window at the clouds below, at the vast expanse of sky stretching toward the horizon, and thought about all the paths that had led her to this moment. A moment of violence in a school hallway, a video that went viral, a community that rallied behind her, a family that believed in her, a friend who never let her fall. All of it had brought her here, to this moment of possibility and hope. She was leaving home, yes, but she was carrying everything that mattered with her. The lessons, the love, the determination to make a difference. As the plane began its descent into New York, Maya pulled out her phone and typed a message to her father. "Thank you for everything, Daddy. I'm going to make you proud." His response came within seconds. "You already have, baby girl, you already have." Maya smiled and tucked her phone away. The city sprawled beneath her, millions of lives intersecting in a tapestry of dreams and struggles and possibilities. Somewhere down there was her future. Law school and courtrooms and the endless fight for justice. There would be victories and defeats, moments of triumph and moments of doubt. But she was ready. She had been preparing for this her whole life. Because Maya Robinson knew something that Gerald Thornton had never understood. You cannot keep someone down forever. No matter how hard you push, no matter how much you try to silence them, the truth has a way of rising. Justice has a way of finding its voice. And sometimes that voice belongs to a 14-year-old girl who was just picking up her homework. A girl who refused to be silenced. A girl who turned her pain into purpose. A girl who changed the world, not by forgetting what happened to her, but by refusing to let it define her. Not by seeking revenge, but by seeking reform. Not by giving up, but by getting up again and again, no matter how many times she was knocked down. That was Maya Robinson's legacy. Not the video of her being pushed into a locker, but the thousands of children who would be safer because she spoke up. Not the moment of her greatest trauma, but the lifetime of advocacy that followed. The plane touched down, and Maya gathered her things. She stepped off the jetway and into the bustling terminal, ready to begin the next chapter of her story. She didn't know exactly what the future held, no one ever does, but she knew who she was and what she stood for. She knew that she was loved and supported and believed in, and she knew that no matter what challenges lay ahead, she would face them with the same courage and determination that had carried her this far. Because Maya Robinson was not just a survivor. She was a fighter, and she was just getting started. The sun rose over New York City on a crisp autumn morning, and Maya Robinson stepped into the future with her head held high, ready to write the next chapter of a story that was far from over. A story of resilience, a story of justice, a story of hope. And somewhere in a prison cell far away, Gerald Thornton watched the morning news and saw the face of the young woman he had tried to break. The young woman who had instead broken a system that had protected men like him for too long. He turned off the television and stared at the wall, contemplating the consequences of a single moment of hatred, a single act of violence that had unraveled his entire life. He had thought he could push her down, and she would stay down. He had been wrong. And that miscalculation would haunt him for the rest of his days. Meanwhile, at Lincoln Heights Middle School, the hallway where Maya had been attacked had been transformed. A mural now covered the wall of lockers, painted by students in bright, hopeful colors. It depicted children of all backgrounds standing together, hands joined, faces raised toward a brilliant sunrise. Beneath the mural, a plaque read, "In honor of Maya Robinson, who taught us that one voice can change the world. Stand up, speak out, never give up." Every morning, students walked past that mural on their way to class. Some of them knew Maya's story. Some of them had been too young to remember when it happened. But all of them understood the message, that even the smallest voice matters, that even the darkest moment can lead to light, that justice is not given, it is fought for, earned, defended, and that as long as there are people willing to stand up for what is right, there is always hope. Always hope. Maya Robinson's journey was just one story among millions, one life in a world full of struggle and suffering and possibility. But it was her story, and she had chosen to use it to make a difference. That choice, made by a scared and hurting 14-year-old girl, had rippled outward in ways she could never have imagined. It had changed laws, changed lives, changed the very fabric of how her community thought about justice and education and the protection of children. And it was a choice that anyone could make. That was the real lesson of Maya's story. Not that she was special or extraordinary, but that the courage she had shown was available to everyone. It lived in every person who saw injustice and refused to look away, in every voice raised in defense of the vulnerable, in every heart that believed that tomorrow could be better than today. Maya Robinson had been pushed down. She had gotten back up, and in doing so, she had shown the world what was possible. The end was just the beginning, and the story continues, in every child who refuses to be silenced, in every parent who demands better, in every community that stands up and says, "No more." This is how change happens. One voice at a time, one choice at a time, one act of courage at a time. And it starts with you. 10 years after the incident that changed her life, Maya Robinson stood before a packed auditorium at Harvard Law School, about to deliver the commencement address. She was 24 years old, graduating at the top of her class, with job offers from the most prestigious civil rights organizations in the country. But as she looked out at the sea of faces, all she could think about was a 14-year-old girl picking up her homework in a school hallway. "When I was asked to give this speech," Maya began, her voice steady and confident, "I spent weeks trying to figure out what wisdom I could possibly offer to a room full of people who have studied justice and law for 3 years. And then I realized that the most important lesson I've learned didn't come from a textbook or a lecture hall. It came from a moment of violence that could have destroyed me. The auditorium was silent, every eye fixed on her. Most of you know my story. The video went viral when I was 14. A teacher pushed me into a locker because I was black, because I dared to speak up for myself, because he thought he could get away with it. And for a long time, I let that moment define me. I was the girl from the video, the victim, the symbol. She paused, gathering herself. But I'm not here to talk about being a victim. I'm here to talk about what comes next. What do you do when the worst thing you can imagine actually happens? How do you pick up the pieces and keep going? Maya walked to the edge of the stage, closer to her audience. The truth is, I almost didn't. There were days when I wanted to disappear, when the attention and the pressure felt unbearable. There were nights when I lay awake replaying that moment over and over, wondering what I could have done differently. There were times when I questioned whether speaking up had been worth it. She let the admission hang in the air. But then, I would think about all the other kids out there who were going through the same thing. Kids who didn't have parents who believed them. Kids who didn't have a video to prove what happened. Kids who were told to be quiet, to stop making trouble, to accept injustice as the price of getting through the day. Her voice grew stronger, and I realized that my pain had a purpose. Not because I deserved what happened to me, but because I had a choice about what to do with it. I could let it break me, or I could use it to break the systems that had failed me and so many others. Maya looked out at the graduates, many of whom had tears in their eyes. You're about to enter a profession that has the power to change lives, to protect the vulnerable, to hold the powerful accountable. That's an enormous responsibility, and I won't pretend it's easy. You will face setbacks. You will lose cases you should have won. You will watch injustice triumph, at least temporarily, and wonder if any of it matters. She shook her head firmly. It matters. Every case matters. Every client matters. Every voice raised in defense of justice matters, not because you'll win every time, but because the fight itself is what gives our lives meaning. Maya thought about her father. Sitting somewhere in the audience, probably crying, she thought about her mother, who had taken a leave of absence from the hospital to be here. She thought about Jasmine, who was watching the live stream from her apartment in Chicago, where she was now a music teacher at an inner-city school. My father taught me that justice isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's something you have to work for every single day. And my journey started in a school hallway with a teacher who thought he could silence me. She smiled, and there was steel in it. He was wrong, and anyone who thinks they can silence any of you is wrong too. You have spent 3 years learning the law. Now go out and use it. Fight for the people who can't fight for themselves. Stand up for what's right, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. And never, ever give up. The applause that followed was thunderous. Graduates rose to their feet, cheering and wiping away tears. Maya stood at the podium, absorbing the moment, feeling the weight of everything that had led her here. After the ceremony, she found her parents in the crowd. Marcus wrapped her in a hug that lifted her off her feet. "I'm so proud of you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I've said it 1,000 times, but I'll never stop saying it." "I couldn't have done it without you, Daddy," Maya said. "Without both of you." Denise joined the embrace, the three of them holding on to each other in the midst of the celebrating crowd. "So," Marcus said when they finally pulled apart, "what's next for the famous Maya Robinson?" Maya grinned. "I've accepted a position with the Children's Defense Fund. I'm going to be working on educational equity cases, making sure that what happened to me doesn't happen to other kids." "That sounds perfect," Denise said. "It's not going to change the world overnight," Maya acknowledged, "but it's a start." "That's all anyone can ask for," Marcus said, "one start at a time." As they walked across the Harvard campus, past the historic buildings and manicured lawns, Maya felt a sense of peace settle over her. The journey that had begun with violence and trauma had led her here, to a place of purpose and possibility. She thought about Gerald Thornton, who had been released from prison after serving 18 months, According to the last news report she'd seen, he was living in another state, working as a warehouse supervisor, forbidden from ever teaching again. She didn't hate him anymore. She had let go of that long ago. But she hoped that somewhere, in whatever quiet moments he had, he understood the magnitude of what he had done and the consequences that had followed. She thought about Lincoln Heights Middle School, which had become a model for educational reform. The Maya Robinson Student Protection Act had been adopted by 17 states, with more considering similar legislation. The hallway where she had been attacked was now home to a peer counseling center, where students could seek help and support without fear of judgment. She thought about Jasmine, who had turned down a prestigious position with a symphony orchestra to teach music to underprivileged children. When Maya had asked her why, Jasmine had smiled and said, "Someone taught me that changing the world starts with one person at a time. I figured I'd start with the kids who need it most." And she thought about all the people she had met along the way, the parents who had thanked her for speaking up, the students who had told her that her story had given them courage, the teachers who had committed to doing better, the legislators who had passed laws to protect children, the journalists who had told her story fairly and honestly. All of them were part of her journey. All of them had shaped who she had become. "You're quiet," Marcus observed as they reached the car. "Just thinking," Maya said. "About what?" She smiled. "About how lucky I am. Not because of what happened, but because of who I had beside me when it did." Marcus put his arm around her shoulders. "We're the lucky ones, baby girl. We're the lucky ones." The drive back to their hotel took them through the streets of Cambridge, past coffee shops and bookstores and students hurrying to their next destination. Maya watched it all with a sense of wonder, still not quite believing that this was her life now. Her phone buzzed with a text from Jasmine. "Watched the whole speech, crying my eyes out. You're amazing, call me later." Maya typed back, "Love you, we'll call tonight." Another text came through, this one from a number she didn't recognize. "Ms. Robinson, my name is Amber Williams. I'm a senior at Jefferson High School in Baltimore. I saw your speech today and I need your help. Something happened to me at my school, and no one will listen. Please." Maya stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed her response. "Amber, I'm listening. Tell me everything." Because that was the point, wasn't it? The work never stopped. There was always another Amber, another student being failed by the system, another voice that needed to be heard. And Maya Robinson would be there to help, just as others had been there for her. That night, after a celebratory dinner with her family, Maya sat in her hotel room and called Amber Williams. The girl's story was painfully familiar. A teacher who had made inappropriate comments, an administration that dismissed her complaints, parents who were too intimidated by the school to fight back. "I don't know what to do," Amber said, her voice breaking. "I feel like I'm going crazy, like maybe I imagined it all." "You didn't imagine it," Maya said firmly. "I believe you, and we're going to figure this out together." She spent the next 2 hours on the phone, listening, taking notes, offering advice. By the time they hung up, Amber had a plan. Documented evidence, witnesses, and a meeting scheduled with an attorney Maya had recommended. "Thank you," Amber said. "Thank you for listening." "That's what I'm here for," Maya replied. "And Amber, you're not alone. You never have to feel alone in this." After they ended the call, Maya sat in the darkness of her hotel room, thinking about the long road ahead. There would be more Ambers, more fights, more moments when the system seemed impossibly rigged against the people it was supposed to protect. But there would also be more victories, more laws changed, more children protected, more voices heard. And as long as there were people willing to stand up, to speak out, to never give up, there was hope. Always hope. Maya Robinson turned off the light and let the darkness embrace her. Tomorrow, she would start her new job. Tomorrow, she would begin the next chapter of her journey. Tomorrow, she would continue the fight. But tonight, she allowed herself to rest, to feel proud of how far she had come, to be grateful for the love that surrounded her. And in the quiet of the night, she made herself a promise. the same promise she had made all those years ago, standing in front of a community meeting, her voice shaking but determined. She would keep fighting, for herself, for Amber, for every child who deserved better. Because that's what justice meant. And Maya Robinson was just getting started. The morning sun rose over Boston, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Maya watched from her window as the city came alive, full of possibility and promise. Somewhere out there, a 14-year-old girl was picking up her homework in a school hallway. Somewhere out there, a teacher was deciding whether to help or harm. Somewhere out there, a choice was being made that would ripple outward in ways no one could predict. Maya couldn't save everyone, she knew that, but she could save some, and every child she protected, every voice she amplified, every injustice she challenged made the world a little bit better. That was enough. That had to be enough. She gathered her things, checked out of the hotel, and stepped into the bright morning light. Her parents were waiting by the car, ready to drive her to her new apartment in Washington, D.C., where her new life was waiting. "Ready?" Marcus asked. Maya smiled and nodded. "Ready." As they drove away from Harvard, leaving behind the campus where she had spent 3 transformative years, Maya looked back one last time. She thought about everything that had happened since that day in the hallway, the pain and the healing, the setbacks and the victories, the moments of despair and the moments of triumph. All of it had led her here. All of it had made her who she was. And she wouldn't change a thing, because Maya Robinson understood something that Gerald Thornton never had. True strength wasn't about having power over others. It was about using whatever power you had to lift people up, to protect the vulnerable, to fight for justice, even when it was hard. That was the legacy she would leave behind. Not the video of her being pushed into a locker, but the thousands of children who would be safer because she refused to stay silent. The story that began with violence had become a story of hope, and it was far from over. As the car merged onto the highway, heading toward Washington and the future, Maya closed her eyes and let herself dream. She dreamed of a world where every child felt safe at school, where every teacher understood their sacred responsibility, where every voice was heard and valued. It was a big dream, maybe an impossible one, but that had never stopped her before. And it wouldn't stop her now. Maya Robinson opened her eyes and looked toward the horizon, toward the life that awaited her. And she smiled, because this was only the beginning.